Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to the video. There is construction going on outside, so there might be some background noise again. I was waiting for them to be quiet a second, and it seems that things have quieted down a little bit now, so I'm going to try and record this video quickly before things get noisy again. So, I was requested to do a competitive fight list over on Patreon a couple of days ago, and I've been working on this list for quite some time now. It was my main deck for the majority of the Uprising meta. However, after Belittle got banned, the deck kind of stopped performing as consistently as it used to. I of course remedied that by adding in a couple of extra blues because the main issue was not hitting the blues at the right time, but then you end up in a situation where you have too many blues in the deck and therefore the Art of War tends to break quite a bit more frequently than it normally would. So I do think missing the Belittle specifically was quite painful for the deck. But that doesn't mean that the deck isn't any good. The deck is still good. It has around a 45% win rate in the current meta game. If you're in a local meta that doesn't run as many Lexis and Azaleas and Azuris and stuff like that, then the win rate can be a little bit higher, of course, because those are the main decks that can really prey on a fight deck to stop it from popping off. But it's just a bit of a feel bad when you activate your Art of War with your Tunic resource and you just draw into a couple of blues. That's not really what the deck wants to do. The deck wants to go all in with all its big red attacks. Of course, you could go for something like a redliner build for Fi in general, but I found that if you go redliner, then you are kind of taking advantage of things like the Rising Resentments red, which are a 3 attack go again by itself, and then you are in a situation that even if you Art of War, like these things are only gonna be a 4 attack with go again, and you cannot really spike those really big spiky combo turns that we are used to seeing with a fight deck, and then the breakpoints become harder, and it's just a big mess. Like, I think we need more access to zero cost 4 attacks with go again, like Scar for Scar, of course, but Scar for Scar we don't run in the deck because it's a bit inconsistent, considering that if we do pop off, generally we are at quite a higher life total than our opponent. So it's a bit annoying, but we just need to work with the tools that are given to us. So what I try to do to kind of remedy the whole Art of War situation a little bit is I am playing 3 copies of Mind State of Tiger. They're not great if you draw into them, of course, because if you draw into them in a combo turn, they are not an attack themselves. But what is great about Mind State of Tiger is that you can plonk this one down on an off turn, and then in the following turn you get a Crouching Tiger in your hand, which is very useful for fight because a Crouching Tiger is an attack action card, and you can use that as a fuel for the Art of War when it says you banish an attack action card from your hand if you do draw 2 cards. So you can kind of turn Art of War into a pot of greed in Yu-Gi-Oh terms, and also gives you a +1 to all your attacks simply by having that Crouching Tiger in your hand. So what I tend to do is, in the early game, I try to get a Mind State of Tiger into my arsenal, and then once it's in the arsenal, I wait until the second turn when I'm about to have my 3rd Tunic counter in the follow-up turn. I play the Mind State of Tiger. If I'm lucky, I already have an Art of War in my hand. At that point, I can put the Art of War in my hand into my arsenal, and then when the next turn rolls around, you need to take up your Tunic counter, activate your Tunic, activate your Art of War, and then you can banish the Crouching Tiger in order to pay for the Art of War, and you can get a very nice combo turn going like that. So what is also cool about the Mind State of Tigers, Crouching Tigers, is that those Crouching Tigers can be used as a resource to pay for the Enlightened Strike as well. Enlightened Strike says put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck, so you can very easily turn this into a 7 attack or even a 5 with a card draw. draw, I guess the 5 with the card draw is the highest value option here, because you get to put a card into your arsenal and you get to kind of pick and choose what you want to do with that. So I'm a big fan of Mindset of Tiger. I've been saying this for quite some time now. Like, Mindset of Tiger is just a really good card. I think it's heavily underutilized. It's a 3 block, it's a 0 cost, so this does activate the Kodachis if you are up against something like a Dromai, and it's a blue card, so you can very easily pitch it for your weapons or your Ember Blade in this case. I see a lot of file lists that are now going full in on the Kodachi build and then running the Moth of Momentum along that. Personally, I think having the Moth of the Bouncing Links is just better, because having that on-demand Lava Burst from your deck or that on-demand Soul to Wound from your deck really helps you to spike those turns into the 25 to 35 damage range. And if you don't have the Moth of the Bouncing Links, it becomes a lot harder to pull it off, especially in a deck that already is running so many blues. Like, Moth of Bouncing Links really adds that level of consistency that Fi really needs at this point of time. So I do think that this is the optimal face mask for Fi at the current meta. Of course, with Ultim going away, maybe things will change a bit, and we're going to see more of an aggro-centric meta where something like a Moth of Momentum can get you more value because the opponents don't want to block anymore, and you can very easily get your Moth of Momentum triggers. But as it stands right now, I think Moth of the Bouncing Links is the better thing. So you might be wondering, why am I running it in the sideboard then? Well, the main reason I'm running Moth of Momentum in the sideboard is for the Dromai matchup specifically, because Dromai, when they start plunking all the dragons down, it's very easy to bring your Kodachis, bring your Moth of Momentum, and then just poking the dragons and then finishing a big dragon off with one of your attacks, like a Rising Resentment or stuff like that, which does trigger the Moth of Momentum, because this one says that it has to be the third or higher chain link in a row to hit. It doesn't mention that it has to hit a hero like a lot of other effects in the game, so hitting the dragons is really good with this Moth especially. But if you're on a budget and you're a new player, you don't need to buy this. Like, this is just here for the Dromai matchup, and I do think the Dromai matchup is more than fine with just the Moth of the Bouncing Links together with the Kodachis. You don't have the card draw, but for the most part, it doesn't really matter all that much. So for the Ranger matchup, I am running 3 copies of Wax on at the moment. I am probably going to cut them again, because for the most part, I tend to not really have the sideboard space, like siding it in over the sink below, so the Waxons are a little bit awkward at times. Like, they can be good, especially against things like Ninja. If you're up against Katsu and you play your Waxon to stop something like a what's called the Whelming Gust Wave, then they cannot even give it the +1 with the Braces or the Ancestral Empowerment, which is quite nice. So you do get the value out of it against the right matchups. However, I'm seeing those matchups less and less, so I'm wondering if it's just better to either run a playset of Fateful Scenes or using these slots for some other tech. I was considering to actually put Oasis Respite in here, because I have seen Kano become a little bit more popular than they used to, and the Oasis Respites are really useful against the Kano matchup in general, because you can kind of shut down the combo turn even as a fight deck, which is something that I'm kind of a fan of. So the Waxons, sorry, the Waxons, they're still a bit experimental, but they have been doing okay, I suppose. In my next iterations, these are probably the first one to get cut, especially if the new set has some tools in it that are beneficial for Fi in general. Then the Waxons are probably going to be leaving the deck, period. I did take the tempos out of the deck. I want to run Command and Conquers again, because I do believe that Command and Conquer has some value in running in general, especially if you combine it with the Ember Blade and a blue in hand, because we are now, sometimes we are kind of flooding on blues because of, well, we're running more blues than we used to. So running the Command and Conquer over the Take to Tempo puts us in a situation that if we have a blue, we can go in with a 0 Go again. Amber Blade, we have 1 resource floating, then we can Tunic and then play the Command and Conquer after that, which can be quite a powerful lineup because then you're coming in for 12 damage and you have a very relevant on-hit, which is something that Take the Tempo doesn't always have in terms of value on hits. You do get an extra card, but because we again running so many blues, many times to Take the Tempo just completely whiffs, which is not really a great experience. So I am running the Command and Conquers again, which is also giving us a little bit more defense against Dromai specifically, because we can now pop Phantasms with the Command and Conquers, but they are not super important. Like if you're on a budget and you're a new player, you can very easily cut these out and put 3 Take the Tempos back in here instead, and you should be more than fine. Or running some different 6 attacks. Like there's plenty of 6 attacks that you can run in this deck that can be quite beneficial for fight in general. So just toy around with it. You can very easily swap these around. Flamescale Furnace can probably be cut as well, and I suppose if you're on a really tight budget, you can also cut Fiendel Spring Tunic, because this one can be very easily replaced with a Blossom of Spring, because for the most part, in most games, we're just using it for the single activation with the 1 resource. This one is superior over the Blossom of Spring because it has the 1 defense tied into it in the lower right corner, which can be relevant if you're trying to stop an on-hit effect like Snatch, which can save you the game in the late game when you're grinding it out and trying to finish off the opponent. But for the most part, if you're in the late game as a fight player, you're usually going to be losing anyway, so yeah, do you really need that 1 defense? I don't know, maybe it's just better to get the Blossom of Spring, because the Blossom of Spring does have 1 big benefit in because you can get that resource on demand at any given time. So even if you are on your 2nd turn, you have your card ready in arsenal, and you do draw into your Art of War early, it's go time on turn 2. Maybe not the best thing to do on turn 2, because generally speaking, I do like to get the opponent's HP to like the 22-25 range. The reason being is that generally speaking, if you pop off with fire, you want to get them into a position where they have to start blocking with card from hand, and if you pop off while they're still at 25 life, usually the opponent is kind of eager to take the damage because they want to see how far you can make things go, and then once they are in that lethal range already and they start blocking with even 2 card from hand, it's very easy for you to keep the tempo by attacking in for 12 damage every turn and forcing them to keep on blocking with 2 or 3 card from hand every single turn. So I am a fan of that in general. The Tiger Stripe Shuko, I guess it's a decent piece to have. Like the 2 block is quite good in general if you're up against something like a Guardian deck, but being able to get that +1 on your small attacks for every 2nd attack non-stop, like every turn almost, it's a huge amount of value that you can generate over the course of the game. So I think in terms of legendaries, if you want to play this deck, that the Tiger Stripe Shuko is one of the must-have pieces that you cannot really skip out on. But other than that, you can replace the Tunic, you can skip the Muzzle Momentum, you can probably just not play the Flamescale Furnace and just go for the Blossom of Spring instead and just try to combo off early, and you should be more than fine. So when it comes to interesting combos in the deck, well, the Spreading Flames kind of function like a second Art of War, because once you play this, most of your attacks are gonna get that +1 buff if you cleverly play them. Like, you do need to make sure that you play your low attacks first and then going into higher attacks like your Amber Blade and stuff in your later chain links, so that you get that +1 from the total draconic chain links. And one of the combos that I personally really like is Soaring Strike, especially if you play Soaring Strike relatively late into the combat chain. When this hits, you get to banish something, and even if you play this as your first attack, you get to banish something that has a cost of 0 or less, which is something like a Snatch, for example. So with the Soaring Strike, if this hits, you can banish the Snatch, and now you have a Snatch with 4 damage, go again, and a card draw and hit, making it super awkward for the opponent to decide what to do. And I really like it. I really like that Soaring Strike and Snatch combo, and this combo line right there is probably one of the main reasons why I haven't converted to a full-on red lineup build yet. I really love that synergy, and I think it's really cool in general. I'm also running a single copy of Razor Reflex. The single copy is because if you draw into it early and you play it early, then your opponent tends to think that you are running multiple copies in your deck. And if you don't draw into it early and you're in this very late game scenario where your opponent's at like 1 or 2 life and you draw into this, then most likely they're not really expecting it anymore because they haven't seen one all game. So drawing it early has a benefit because they might end up overblocking in the late game because they saw Razor Reflex and they might be expecting another one. And drawing it in the very late game has the benefit of you can close out the game because they don't expect it. So the Flame Call Awakening and Phoenix Flame combo, I run these in the main deck. The main reason I'm running it is that I kind of use this like a pseudo belittle package, if that makes any sense. What I like to do is I go in with the Rising Resentment, for example. I play my Flame Call Awakening by pitching something like a red if I don't have enough blues. Then I can fetch myself a Phoenix Flame straight from the deck. Then I can play the Phoenix Flame that I just gotten from the deck and activate Fight at the Phoenix Flame that's in the graveyard to my hand. And now I'm in a situation where I have a Phoenix Flame in hand, which I can very easily then pitch to pay for something like a Soaring Strike or a Mounting Anger. And it creates this very nice little synergy where you constantly play the flame you pull from the deck and then pitch the flame that you didn't pull from the deck. Once you have used up all your Flame Call Awakenings, you of course don't want to pitch these anymore, then it's probably more beneficial to just keep them in the graveyard, because that way if you have too many blues you can still activate Fight during your opponent's turn, pitch a blue, grab a Phoenix Flame from the graveyard, and then you already have your first Draconic Chain Link to get everything rolling that way. But all in all, the deck is still really a lot of fun to play. Here's another piece that I didn't cover. I run Double Strike in here. The reason why I have a single copy of Double Strike is because the Double Strike can be fetched with Master of the Pouncing Links. So if you're in a situation where, let's say, you already have a Lever Burst in hand and you already have a Salt to Wound in hand and you don't have a Soaring Strike to give one of these go again, then what you can do is you can crack your Master of the Pouncing Links in order to fetch yourself a Double Strike from the deck. This one will come in with 2 separate instances of damage, which means that each instance adds another chain link in case of the Lever Burst, if that's important at that point of time, but also each hit adds a +1 value to the Salt to Wound. So if you have Double Strike together with a Art of War, then this is coming in for 4 would go again by itself, 5 would go again if you count the Tiger Stripe Shuko as well, and then each hit adds another one point of value to the Salt to Wound. So theoretically you're getting like 6 value out of the Double Strike simply because you're buffing the Salt to Wound that much. So that's why I'm running 1 copy of this card in here. It's simply as an alternative fetch from the deck. You don't really want to draw into this. If you do draw into it early, I suggest that you pitch it to the bottom if you can, because you want to have the flexibility in the deck to be able to pull this one out if you do flood on your finishes. We can only give so many finishes go again, especially since we only have the Snapdragon skills and very few ways to give go again to our finishes, so being able to fetch this to gain some additional value can be quite powerful in general. I will put the link to this deck down in the description so you can check out the sideboard guide and stuff like that, and I think for the most part you will have a lot of fun navigating this deck. I do think that Katsu right now is the superior ninja deck at this point of time, but I mean, everyone has their favorite ninja deck, right? Like, some people prefer to play Katsu, some people prefer to play Fai. Personally, I like both decks about equally. Like, they both fill a niche of card gaming styles that I personally like, so I'm fine playing either of the decks, but right now if you want to go competitive and you do want to go ninja, you probably should go for the Katsu deck. I do have a video on the channel about that as well. It's not my latest version of Katsu. I will be updating that version very soon. I haven't really had the time to record that yet, and I haven't really had time to update my February link either, but I will do a video about it, so keep an eye out for that. And again, if this kind of content is useful to you, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video and leaving a comment. The comments are a bit on the low side lately, and if I want to continue doing Flesh and Blood content, I do need a significant amount of comments to make my content relevant in the algorithm. Also, if you want to support me, there is a Patreon link down in the description as well, patreon.com/KuganeGaming. And yeah, that's pretty much all for me for today. I hope this deck will be useful to you. If you do play it, please let me know how your results go. Feel free to PM me or leave a comment down here, and I will see you all next time with another Flesh and Blood video. Take care.